This is Tony T here from Tony'sPicks.com with our college football pick show. This is week 12, part 4. Hey, we've got 15 games here, which means we'll have all 50 for Saturday done already on our channel for this Saturday's card. For more free pick videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Lots of free picks over our channel delivered by myself, as well as our team of cappers here at Tony'sPicks.com, making this a great channel to subscribe to. Hit us up with that like, that thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. Then visit our site, Tony'sPicks.com. We're a multi-capper site showcasing top performers in our industry. Click the links to the hot cappers, get signed up to long-term passes. Guys like Sean Higgs, DeAndre doing great work. Brian Biller has been absolutely on fire here as well. Ron Crawford as well, hitting the leaderboards as well. Latest perfect series on the page with best bets and more. We will be locked and loaded for this card here on Friday. Remember, all of our one-day passes are profit guaranteed. The most turn of profit amount purchase will be correct back to our account for site price. That's profit guarantee. And then our promo code TonyT at checkout will knock off that 15%. The link is in the description to get signed up. So let's go ahead. Let's get this one underway. All right, we start with Coastal Carolina and Georgia Southern. This one for action on Saturday. All right. We got Coastal Carolina here 6-3 after their 40-27 home victory against Georgia State. The Chanticleers were light in the passing game and rushed for 324 yards for 6.9 yards per pass attempt. On defense, they held the Panthers to 3.5 yards per carry with 293 yards passing for 7.7 yards per pass attempt. Samari Collier here, 11 of 18 passing for 120 yards with 3 touchdowns. He rushed for 123 yards and the score. Georgia Southern 4-5 with a 25-23 road win at App State. Eagles had a huge passing game and rushed for 142 yards for 3.7 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Mountaineers on the ground and allowed 348 yards passing for 6.8 yards per pass attempt. J.C. French, 25 of 37 for 252 yards with a touchdown. Coastal Carolina 2-1 on the road against the Sun Belt with a 40-point loss at Old Dominion. Georgia Southern is 1-1 at home in the conference. The Chanticleers on the road in conference play, rushing for 4.7 yards a carry, but surrendering 35 points per game with 5.4 yards per rush and 7.1 yards per pass attempt. The Eagles at home in conference play put up 38 points per game with 7.6 yards per pass attempt, but poor defending the pass. 2 poor pass defenses here in their home and away spots in conference. The Chanticleers 3-0 to the over in their past 3 games. Pick here Coastal Carolina and the Georgia Southern to go over 61. Utah and Baylor going off on Saturday. Utah now 7-2 after their 45-14 home victory against Cincinnati. The Utes had movement in the passing game and rushed for 267 yards for 5 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 208 yards rushing for 6.9 yards a carry with 6.7 yards per pass attempt. Devin Dampier in the game, 16 of 31 for 213 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. He rushed for 78 yards. Baylor 5-4 after a 30-3 home victory against UCF. The Bears had a really good passing game and rushed for 150 yards for 3.8 yards per carry. On the defense, they limited the Knights through the air and allowed 74 yards rushing for 3.2 yards a carry. Sawyer Robertson, 29 of 40 for 267 yards and 3 touchdowns. Baylor 2-1 at home in conference with a 3-point loss at Arizona State. Utah 1-1 on the road in conference play with a loss at BYU. Utah on the road in the Big 12 struggling stopping the run and by allowing 232 yards for 5.1 yards per pass attempt. Here, that's on the pass, by the way, stopping the pass. Offensively in conference play at home, the Bears get really good play at quarterback and defend the run and pass well. Utah 3-6 to the spread on the road against winning teams. We'll take Baylor here at plus the 8. Purdue and Washington going off on Saturday. Purdue fell to 2-8 with their 34-10 home defeat to Ohio State. The Boilermakers had a poor pass performance and rushed for 92 yards for 4.2 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 473 yards with poor work against the run and pass. Ryan Brown here completed 10 of 19 for 76 yards with a pick. Washington 6-3 with a 13-10 road defeat in Wisconsin. The Huskies were poor through the air and rushed for 117 yards for 3.3 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Badgers to 48 passing yards with 157 yards rushing for 3.3 yards per carry. Damon Williams here, 20 of 32 passing for 134 yards with a touchdown and a pick. He rushed for 61 yards in the game. Purdue 0-3 on the road against the Big Ten and have been competitive in 2 of those games, losing by 7 or fewer points. Washington 2-1 at home against the conference with that loss coming to Ohio State by 18. They had wins by 17 to Illinois, 19 to Rutgers. The Boilermakers offensively in conference play, putting up just 12 points per game with really bad play at quarterback and giving up nearly 5 yards per rush. Washington at home in the Big Ten is getting great play at quarterback. We'll go ahead and lay it here with Washington minus 16.5. Utah State and UNLV going off on Saturday. We got Utah State now 5-4 with a 51-14 home victory against Nevada. The Aggies had a huge passing performance and rushed for 145 yards for 3.6 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Wolfpack through the air and allowed 120 yards rushing for 3.6 yards per carry. Bryson Barnes, 20 of 27 for 280 yards with 3 touchdowns. He rushed for 40 yards in the game. UNLV improved to 7-2 with a 42-10 road win at Colorado State. The Rebels gained 571 yards with really good work in the run and passing game. On defense, they limited the Rams to 3 yards per rush with 189 yards passing for 6.5 yards per pass attempt. Anthony Condrea, 15 of 22 passing for 251 yards with 2 touchdowns and a pick. He rushed for 33 yards and 2 scores. Utah State 3-1 the over in their 4 road games. UNLV has gone over in 3 of 4. The Aggies on the road in conference play rushed for 5.7 yards a carry with 7.2 yards per pass attempt and allowing 39 points per game with poor work against the run and pass. UNLV at home averaging 44 points per game and surrendered 44 behind great offense and poor defense in all areas. The pick here would be Utah State and UNLV over 70. Florida and Ole Miss going off here on Saturday. We've got Florida now 3-6 after a 38-7 road defeat at Kentucky. The Gators were poor in the passing game and rushed for 104 yards for 3.2 yards a carry. On defense, they gave limited yardage through the air, but allowed 233 yards rushing for 5.3 yards per rush. DJ Lagway here, 11 of 19, passed for 83 yards with a touchdown and 3 picks. Ole Miss here 9-1 after a 49-0 home victory against FCS Citadel. 2 weeks ago, it was a 30-14 home victory against South Carolina. The Rebels were limited through the air and rushed for 258 yards for 5.7 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Gamecocks to 50 rushing yards with 180 yards passing for 6 yards per pass attempt. Trinidad Chambliss here, 29 of 33 passing for 333 yards and 3 touchdowns. Florida 0-4 straight up, end of the spread on the road against all power conference schools. Ole Miss 3-0 at home against the SEC. Florida on the road is averaging 11 points per game with poor run and passing performance. They surrender 31 points on the road as they allow 4.9 yards per rush and 8.2 yards per pass attempt. Ole Miss at home in conference play rushing for 4.5 yards a carry and getting great quarterback play. They limit SEC teams at home to 3.7 yards per rush and 60% completion rate. The Rebels have covered all 3 home games against the SEC. Pick here Ole Miss minus 14.5. Delaware and Sam Houston State for action on Saturday. We've got Delaware now 5-4 after a 25-24 home victory against Louisiana Tech. The Blue Hens had movement in the passing game and rushed for 95 yards for 4 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 3.9 yards per carry with 202 yards passing for 8.1 yards per pass attempt. It was Nick Mininucci, 26 of 52 passes for 304 yards and 2 touchdowns. He also threw 2 picks in the game. He rushed for 55 yards. Sam Houston is now 1-8 after a 21-17 road win at Oregon State. The Bearcats were poor through the air and rushed for 72 yards for 3 yards per carry. On defense, they allowed 4.7 yards per rush in the game with 286 yards passing for 6.8 yards per pass attempt. Mabrey Mature, 4 of 10 passing for 43 yards and a touchdown. Delaware 1-2 on the road in Conference USA. The Bearcats are winless against the conference. Delaware in conference play, allowing 5.1 yards per rush with 67% completion rate. They are a poor rushing team in Conference USA. The Bearcats have rushed for 5.2 yards per carry in conference play. The Blue Hens have failed to cover 4 and 5. Pick here Sam Houston State plus 9.5. Texas and Georgia. This one here Saturday night. Got Texas now 7-2 after a 34-31 home victory against Vanderbilt. The Longhorns had a good passing performance and rushed for 100 yards for 3.7 yards a carry on defense. They limited the Commodores to 2.4 yards per rush with 365 yards passing for 9.6 yards per pass attempt. Arch Manning in the game, 25 of 33 passing for 328 yards with 3 touchdowns. Georgia sits at 8-1 with a 41-21 road win at Mississippi State. Georgia gained 567 yards in the game with good work in the pass and run game. On defense, they allowed 3.5 yards per rush with 173 yards passing for 6.9 yards per pass attempt. Gunnar Stockton in the game, 18-29 pass for 264 yards and 3 touchdowns. Texas 2-2 on the road, all against power conference schools. Georgia's lone loss came at home by 3 to Alabama. Texas on the road averaging 2.8 yards per carry and struggled with accuracy at the quarterback position. On defense on the road, they're allowing 71% completion rate for 8.2 yards per pass attempt, but good with run defense. Georgia at home in conference play, rushing for 5.2 yards a carry with 8.5 yards per pass attempt. They defend the run well at home in conference. The Longhorns have failed to cover 7 of 9. Georgia's covered 5 of 6. Pick here, Georgia minus 6.5. Virginia Tech and Florida State going off here on Saturday. We got Virginia Tech dropping to 3-6 after a 28-16 home defeat to Louisville. The Hokies were poor through the air and rushed for 164 yards for 4.1 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Cardinals on the ground but allowed 235 yards rushing for 6.9 yards a carry. Tyrone Jones here, 11-24 passes for 76 yards and a touchdown. He rushed for 85 yards and a score. Florida State fell to 4-5 with a 24-10 road defeat to Clemson. The Seminoles had movement in the passing game and rushed for 110 yards for 4.2 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Tigers to 2.7 yards per rush with 221 yards passing for 8.2 yards per pass attempt. Tommy Castellanos here, 23 of 43 passing for 250 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Florida State 1-5 straight up and to the spread against the ACC. Virginia Tech is 1-1 on the road in conference play. Hokies on the road in the ACC rushed for 6.6 yards a carry. Florida State in conference play struggles with quarterback accuracy and allows 67% completion rate for 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Hokies 6-4 the spread on the road in conference play. Pick here Virginia Tech plus 14. UCLA and Ohio State for Saturday night. UCLA fell to 3-6 after a 28-21 home defeat to Nebraska. The Bruins had movement in the passing game and rushed for 157 yards for 4.2 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per rush with 205 yards passed for 13.7 yards per pass attempt. Nico Iamaleava here, 17-25 passes for 191 yards and 2 touchdowns. He rushed for 86 yards. Ohio State sits at 9-0 with a 34-10 road win at Purdue. The Buckeyes gained 473 yards with good work in the run and pass. Limit the Boilermakers to 94 passing yards with 92 yards on the ground for 4.2 yards a carry. Julian Sayin here, 27-33 passes for 303 yards with a touchdown and a pick. Rain and wind are forecasted. The Buckeyes have allowed 10 points or fewer in 7 of their 9 games. UCLA has held to 6 points at Indiana a couple weeks ago. Buckeyes 5-2 the under in their past 3 games. We'll go UCLA and Ohio State under 47.5. Mississippi State and Missouri for Saturday. Mississippi State now 5-5 after a 41-21 home defeat to Georgia. The Mississippi State Bulldogs had some movement in the passing game and rushed for 149 yards for 3.5 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 567 yards with poor work against the run and pass. Blake Shapen here, 10-15 pass for 86 yards in the game. Missouri fell to 6-3 after a 38-17 home defeat to Texas A&M. The Tigers had a poor passing performance and rushed for 207 yards for 6.1 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 464 yards with poor performance against the run and pass. Bo Burpilla is doubtful with an ankle injury. Mark Zollers here started last week, 7-22 for 77 yards. Purdue injury a massive concern here. Mississippi State on the road in conference play, getting good quarterback play and 8.4 yards per pass attempt. Missouri at home in conference is poor in pass defense by allowing 69% completion rate for 8.2 yards per pass attempt. The Bulldogs have covered 8 of 10. We'll take Mississippi State here at +7. Kennesaw State and Jacksonville State going off on Saturday. We've got Kennesaw State now 7-2 after a 24-21 road win at New Mexico State. The Owls had movement in their passing game and rushed for 208 yards for 4.7 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 2.1 yards per rush to the Aggies with 241 yards passing for 5.2 yards per pass attempt. Amari Odom here, 14 of 30 passing for 219 yards with 3 touchdowns and 2 picks. Jacksonville State 6-3 after their 30-27 road win at UTEP. The Gamecocks had some movement in their passing game and rushed for 275 yards for 7 yards per rush. On defense, they allowed 3.5 yards per rush in the game with 244 yards passing for 7.6 yards per pass attempt. Caden Creel, 15 of 31 for 181 yards with a touchdown and a pick. He rushed for 134 yards. Gamecocks have won 4 straight, and the Owls have won 7 straight. Kennesaw State on the road, rushing for 5 yards a carry, but struggling with quarterback accuracy. On defense in Conference USA on the road, they're allowing 269 yards passing. Jacksonville State at home in conference play rushing for over 6 yards a carry and holding teams to 3.9 yards per carry. Kennesaw State 2-4 the spread on the road against Conference USA. The Gamecocks 12-4 the spread at home. We'll take care of Jacksonville State here plus the 3. Louisiana Tech and Washington State for Saturday. Louisiana Tech fell to 5-4 after a 25-24 road defeat to Delaware. The Bulldogs had movement in their passing game and rushed for 131 yards for 3.9 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 4 yards per rush to the Blue Hens with 304 yards passing for 5.8 yards per pass attempt. Trey Kugel here, 3 of 3 passing in relief for 66 yards. Starter Blake Baker out for the season. Washington State fell to 4-5 after a 10-7 road defeat at Oregon State. The Cougars were limited in the passing game and rushed for 125 yards for 3.6 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Beavers to 60 yards passing with 124 yards rushing for 3 yards per carry. Zevi Ekos, 13 of 24 passing for 146 yards and 2 picks. Louisiana Tech has lost 3 of 4 on the road. Washington State has a 21-point home win against Toledo. The Bulldogs on the road rushing for just 2.9 yards a carry and getting poor quarterback play. Washington State getting good work at quarterback at home. The Cougars have covered 4 of their past 5. We'll take Washington State here minus 7.5. TCU and BYU going off here on Saturday. TCU fell to 6-3 after a 20-17 home defeat to Iowa State. The Horned Frogs had movement in their passing game and rushed for 113 yards for 3.8 yards a carry. On defense, they limited the Cyclones through the air and rushed for 161 yards for 3.9 yards a carry. Josh Hoover here, 34 of 50 for 319 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. BYU sits at 8-1 after a 29-7 road defeat at Texas Tech. The Cougars were inefficient in the air and rushed for 67 yards for 2.5 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 3.5 yards per rush in the game with 219 yards passing for 6.8 yards per carry. Barrett Bachmeier, 23 of 38 passes for 108 yards with a touchdown and a pick. BYU 2-0 at home in the Big 12 as they rush for 4.4 yards a carry and getting efficient quarterback play. The Cougars at home in conference play allowing a 55% completion rate. TCU 1-2 on the road in the Big 12. They struggled to run the football on the road in the Big 12 and surrendered a 66% completion rate. for 7.5 yards per pass attempt. TCU 0-3 to the spread on the road in conference play. Pick here BYU minus 3.5. Boise State and San Diego State. This one for Saturday. We got Boise State now 6-3 after a 30-7 home defeat to Fresno State. The Broncos were ineffective through the air and rushed for 91 yards for 3.1 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Bulldogs to 35 passing yards with 189 rushing for 4 yards a carry. Max cut forth 14-29 pass for 160 yards with a touchdown and 2 picks. Cutforth was inserted into action for the injured starter Maddox Madsen, who was out with an ankle injury after throwing 4 passes. San Diego State 7-2 with a 38-6 road defeat to Hawaii. The Aztecs were ineffective through the air and rushed for 135 yards for 4 yards a carry. On defense, they allowed 3.7 yards per rush with 258 yards passing for 7.5 yards per pass attempt. Jaden Denegal here, 10 of 27 passes for 132 yards and 2 picks. Boise State on the road in conference play, allowing 20 points per game. They rush on the road here at Mountain West play for 5.5 yards a carry. San Diego State at home in conference play, holding teams to 15 points per game with 3.4 yards per rush and 5.3 yards per pass attempt. The Aztecs have gone under in 5 of 7. The Broncos have gone under in 2 straight. Backup quarterback for the Broncos here are concerned here. We'll take Boise State and San Diego State under 41.5. Wyoming and Fresno State for Saturday. We got Wyoming now 4-5 after their 24-7 road defeat to San Diego State. The Cowboys had a poor pass performance and rushed for 69 yards for 1.9 yards a carry. They allowed nearly 5 yards per rush along with 194 yards passing for 8.8 yards per pass attempt. Caden Anderson here, 12 of 24 passes for 93 yards and 3 picks. Fresno State 6-3 with their 30-7 road win at Boise State. The Bulldogs had a bad passing performance and rushed for 189 yards for 4 yards a carry. On defense, they held the Broncos to 102 yards passing for 91 yards rushing for 3.1 yards a carry. Carson Conklin in the game, 10 of 21 passes for 35 yards. The Cowboys in conference play on the road put up 14 points per game with poor quarterback play. On defense against the Mountain West on the road, they're allowing 5.8 yards per rush with 7.6 yards per pass attempt. The Bulldogs are at home rushing for 5.7 yards a carry and limiting opponents to 3.5 yards per rush with 6.2 yards per pass attempt. Wyoming 1-4 the spread as a road underdog of 7 or fewer points. Pick here Fresno State minus 3.5. For more free pick videos, be sure to subscribe to our channel. Lots of free picks on our channel for myself and our team of cappers here at Tony'sPicks.com, making it a great channel to subscribe to. Hit us up with that like, that thumbs up. We greatly appreciate it. Then visit our site, Tony'sPicks.com, for our best bets, our premium places there, and check out our top performers on our leaderboards. Guys like Sean, DeAndre, Brian Bittler, Ron Crawford's been red hot on the boards as well. Guys you know from our live shows as well as our YouTube videos. Brian Palmer hitting the boards as well. And of course, our latest premiums here, center of the page with best bets and more will be locked and loaded here for this weekend card. Our promo code TonyT at checkout knocks off that 15%. The link is in the description to get signed up. That's going to do it for now. I'm Tony T. We'll talk to you later.